Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to The Great Retention with Camber Parker, sponsored by the Yo Pro Know. I'm Camber, your young professional expert and founder of the Yo Pro Know, where we bring you the answers you need to know about how to hire and retain the best talent, starting with the young professionals you work with. There's a lot of young professional fish in the sea, as I like to say, but how do you catch them? And what do you do once you reel them in? That's where we come in. Today, I am so excited to have Eric Weissmann join us, Executive Director at Next here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm a member of Next. I know I talk a lot about that in this Yo Pro Know community. I'm part of a mentoring program there, and I've been really fortunate to be a beneficiary of the work that Eric is doing in the entrepreneurial space. It's making a really big difference in my life. If you've been following the journey, then you definitely have seen some of the results from that. And his work is really more than just supporting entrepreneurs. It's building an ecosystem that supports the upstate's economy and brings jobs to Greenville and beyond that, right? So we're going to talk a lot about that today. I invited him to join the show because one thing that we know about young professionals is that they are very entrepreneurial and innovative in nature. And who better to talk to than one of the pillars of innovation here in our community? We can't wait to dive into all of these details. Eric, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Really excited you're here. And I feel like we always see each other at all these Next events. So now we're just really going to get the opportunity to dive in and have some of those conversations we haven't had yet. So we're going to do what I like to call a lightning round to get things started. So answer in a couple of sentences. First up, what is something that is not found on your resume?
Something that's not found on my resume is that I have recorded a voiceover for an audiobook. And we'll just leave it at that because it was during COVID, and I thought something I'd always wanted to do, so I threw in an audition, and let's just say that the subject matter is interesting.
Oh boy! I mean, we won't make you uncomfortable on the show, but I might ask you later on to tell me that is not on your resume. Good to know. Why did you move to Greenville?
For this job, for this opportunity with Next, as the executive director of an organization that's been around for the better part of a decade, really, and a strong foundation of support, both from the city and the county and the chamber. And my work from, I know this is not a lightning round, this is like a real storm. This is
it's okay.
a whole front coming through. But I was grew up and lived in Cincinnati, did similar work in an organization called Centrifuge. I was there for about 8.5 years, been here for 2 years now, so the better part of a decade. I've been supporting entrepreneurial ecosystems and really learning the ins and outs of it. So this opportunity was one that I was eager to jump at and dabble in the ingredients of what makes this community special. To me, entrepreneurial ecosystems is kind of like chili. Everybody's got their own recipe, but we call it all chili. You could have, white beans and chicken chili and all that sort of stuff, but it's still chili. So entrepreneurial ecosystems are the same way. What are your ingredients? We're going to call it an ecosystem. So what can you make with these ingredients? And I think we've got a lot of the raw materials here to be very successful. Yeah,
well, we're going to dive more into that in a second, but thanks for starting us off. Can you share a memorable experience that you've had working with a young professional or just young professionals in the past? What did those experiences look like?
Yeah, I think that from my experience, and like I said, my background's really been in marketing. That is normally an entry level, I don't mean entry level career, but it's an entry point to professional stepping stone to the start of your career. So no shortage of young professionals that have worked with me over the decades, really, and learning from them about what they know and about what they don't know, and what you are taught in school and book learning, and that whole difference between street smarts and common sense and book smarts is something that is not always easily digested by young professionals, because when you're on that escalator of matriculation from your first grader and then you become a second grader and then you become a middle school and then high school, and you're just on that train after you go through 12 years and you go through another 4 or 5 years and you're just used to that. And then you get out into the real world and the escalator stopped. You were on this thing that was moving and keeping you going forward, and now I don't get I'm used to getting some sort of accolade or some sort of advancement from June to September. Now I'm in new. It doesn't happen. you're not always going to get promoted every year. There's not going to be that level of advancement.
Yeah.
So how do you stay focused? How do you stay motivated? How do you channel that energy into really being patient and understanding that this is a process and that with time comes learning and seasoning. It's a line from Vampire Weekend song that wisdom is a gift and you trade it for youth. And that's what you have to experience. You have to go through that. Yeah. But that's one thing that I've learned from that is exposure to these young professionals who may be impatient.
Yeah.
And the reason they're impatient, the reason they get frustrated is because we all have been given these progression kind of milestones. And then when you jump into a career, you don't get those all the time.
Right. You are touching on something that a lot of leaders, a lot of experienced professionals look at as this weakness of young professionals, that they come in, they look for that fast track, that fast, growth progression. But I think you put it in a really nice, eloquent way. And I think it's all about perspective, right? It's all about perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been through this, right? This is not a common or a recent effect here. I've been in the business world for the better part of 30 years now, and I felt the same way. Right. Of man, you're going through all of these jobs and these or not jobs. You're going through school, and then you all of a sudden kind of hit the brakes, and you're out there and you're like, what? You've been sitting in this seat for 10 years, and they're like, yeah. That's what. Welcome to the world,
right.
And I just think that there seems to be more exposure to that now, and I'm not trying to equate that into that mindset of everybody gets a medal, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's a reality of there comes a time when you need to slow down a little bit and bloom where you're planted, grow some roots. But at the same stretch, my personal career, I think I'm on my 5th or 6th job right now. So, career paths are nonlinear. That's the way it's going to be. Gone are the days of lifetime employment where congratulations, you're going to be here for the next 35 years.
Right.
Like that's not something that is existent anymore. And I think that when we talk about how are we as a group really energizing and paying attention to that fact. And that's where entrepreneurship and innovation comes in, is that if you can just figuratively ask, like let's talk about the freshman class at Clemson or Furman or pick a university. Just imagine we get them all in one room. And ask, so how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you are excited to work for the same company for the next 30 years after graduation? How many hands would go up? 0. Yeah. But then you ask them, okay, how many of you would ever entertain the idea about being your own boss or working for yourself one day? How many? All of them would go up. So how are we as society, as education, as professionals, how are we gearing towards that? And how are we pushing them in that direction? Because that's the reality. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really great segue into my next question. So thank you. We're talking today about young professionals, right? This group that you just mentioned, sitting in the classroom.
Somehow I'm here, right? I'm not.
No, this is we like talking to leaders that have experienced this. They have experiences to share, and so we're talking about this young professional generation. So we have Gen Z and millennials that are going to make up 2/3 of the workforce in the next several years. Help us set the stage by talking about what this means from an innovation lens, which is kind of what you just started talking about, and what does this mean for the workforce as a whole?
I think, when you talk about large global corporations, and especially, my experience is, clearly in North America, I can't speak too much from a global standpoint, but, those companies had a strong role in ecosystems, in communities, in states, in regions. But I don't know what the stat is, but it's over 90% of the companies. I think this is from a South Carolina standpoint, and I think you can extrapolate that to other states. 90% of the companies in the state are 2 employees or less. We talk about number of companies. Yeah. So small businesses have always been the backbone, have always been integral into community development. Yes, we need to have Procter & Gamble and Kroger and Michelin and Milliken and Bosch. Those large companies need to be here. They're major employers. But we can't lose sight of the fact of the smaller stores and the smaller solopreneurs. So now with this generation that you're mentioning, there's even more of an opportunity for them to chart their own path. And similar to your progression of saying, I think I want to do this. I see a need over here, and I want to go down this path. That is a viable career path. And from my experience in growing up in Cincinnati, it used to be that if you were on that fast track, you were going to be either working for Kroger or Fifth Third Bank or Procter & Gamble, whatever. Entrepreneurship is a viable career path. Being that founder or being that first employee, that person that can help facilitate that vision is important. So I think that exposing that young, fresh talent to those opportunities, to say that you don't have to, your path doesn't have to be a white collar desk job, and really demystifying that. I have two boys, 22 and 20, and as they were growing up and seeing me, especially for the last few years in this entrepreneurial world, they're like, Dad, I don't want to sit behind a desk every day. And if you think I sit behind a desk and that's all that I do, that's not at all what it is. So I think there's some stereotypes that we have to break down, and some addressing of a more flexible and just focusing on a career path versus just one linear straight line.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that was actually really what initiated my business in the first place was, 5.5 years ago when I started my blog, I wanted to show other young professionals that there were other things out there. I worked for a Fortune 250 insurance company. I thought that you either went into finance, law, healthcare, et cetera. There's so many other opportunities. Look at both of us now. And so I think it's pretty incredible. So I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing that I want to touch on, and this is a little bit of a curveball, do you know any of the data out there on what younger entrepreneurs are, like how that looks versus maybe some more late stage entrepreneurs?
The way that I would answer that is that the stereotype is always that entrepreneurs are only young. That those are the only ones that have this kind of maverick attitude of move fast and break stuff. The reality is that average age is going up. And I think we have COVID to thank for that. Some of the economic downturns or economic uncertainty has really exacerbated and facilitated people to say, you know what, before this, I'm a server and I'm at Walt Disney World and I'm making good money. Or I'm at Las Vegas or wherever. Pick. And I can't. I've always wanted to do something else, but I can't walk away from this job. Well, now you can, because things are changing, and now you're like, you know what? This is the opportunity that I've been looking for. So I think that's one of the reasons why that average age is increasing. So that's not to say to take risks only when you're younger, but it's an easier time. It's never easy to be an entrepreneur. And it's never a solo sport. Although you feel alone and you feel like I'm the only one that's having these problems. And that's where Next comes in from the startup Greenville community that we're fostering. And we didn't create it. It was here. We're identifying it. We're saying, we're all a part of this ecosystem. And how are we moving forward together? How are we connecting these dots and collaborating with each other? And where do people get lost in the ecosystem? Where do people come into the ecosystem? Where do they drop out? What do we need? Who's taking the pulse of like the Fitbit for the ecosystem? Who's doing that? So connecting those entrepreneurs is important. And I think that, back to the question of, are there only young entrepreneurs? I would say no. And I think that it's important to have a diverse background of, maybe you think that you're going to graduate from college and I'm just going to be an entrepreneur. Right. Well, that's not always how it works. And your first idea is not going to work, and your first 7 ideas may not work. But it's important to learn from entrepreneurs and to learn from other people that are out there, and really make connections and network with people that they may be only 10 feet in front of you on the trail, but they're in front of you.
Yeah.
They're learning this stuff. So that's another thing that you may be, and you are 10 feet, 20 feet in front of somebody. And while you think I haven't made it yet, I haven't done this, I haven't cracked this, I haven't, like you've accomplished a lot. I mean, personally, and that's not without merit. To teach the other people that are behind you to say, I'm going to learn from that.
Yeah. One thing that you said is, we can learn from entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So my next question is really pointing to these business leaders who might be listening or watching that are really trying to be proactive and figure out new ways to understand, attract, and engage young professionals.
Yeah.
How do you do that using entrepreneurship and innovation? Because I think that, again, that's so important to this young generation, this next generation. They are very entrepreneurial in nature. There's a lot of data out there that shows that they are more entrepreneur at this stage in their life than the baby boomers were when they were young professionals. So what do leaders do?
So the concept that I want to introduce, and this is not something that I created, a guy named Ben Casnocha wrote a book called The Alliance, and it's about how the rules of work and the rules of engagement, the contract employment, those days are over, like I said. And there are some very conservative companies in my background that that's how they wooed people is you're going to be here. You don't have to worry about anything. We'll feed you in this cafeteria. We will give you a pension. You don't have to look that up, Google that, what that word means. It's like nobody knows anymore. But that's those days are gone. So now it's more of an alliance. It's more of a pairing of where do you want to go? And how can I help you get there? And how can you help me during that time? Because you're not going to work here forever. Let's figure out a way to make this work over the next 3 to 5, 2 to 3 years, and understand that this is going to be a progression. So some of the disarming things when I'm interviewing folks for roles is to say, what do you want to do after this?
Yeah.
What do you mean? I want this job. I'm like, I understand, but where is this job going to get you? Have you thought through that? How can I help you become a COO or a technologist for a data research company? What do you want to do after this? What's the job after the job? And I think that mindset is helpful it's a fresh mindset for anybody to have in hiring of just an acknowledgement of, hey, we all know you're not going to retire here. But over the next, again, 2 to 3, 3 to 5 years that we're going to be working together, how do we make this mutually beneficial? So I'm sure we can course correct if I got the name, if I got the title of that book wrong. But that was an interesting mindset, and it especially plays a role when you're talking about startups and entrepreneurship of it's iterative. We're going to additive. We're going to learn things as we go along, and we're going to get better.
So I love all of that. We tell companies that now when we go in and work with them, and we have data on this, that companies that will engage somebody enough to keep them for 2 to 5 years, they're going to get a return on their investment, right?
The companies.
Sure. When you and the young professional or the talent of any age will, in theory, also get that investment. But when you lose somebody under a year, that's going to be a lot of time, a lot of money on your part, and helping companies understand that just because they don't stay for 5+ years doesn't mean that it's a bad investment. They can still help you from a financial perspective. They can help you from a culture perspective. And again, I love that attitude of saying, what do you want to do next?
Yeah.
How can I help you get to the next level? Yeah. That shows you're a good leader. And it, again, embraces that innovation and entrepreneurial touch, which I like.
If it's not a mutual agreement, if we don't both agree of what are we going to get out of this, then it becomes a grind.
Yeah.
Then it becomes back to the coal mine. Then we're just grinding it out. Yeah. And that's not good for anybody. Yeah. So you need to be fulfilled. And you need to have that fresh acknowledgement of just an open understanding right at the beginning of, hey, I'm not looking to do this for 20 years with you. And that's just a different mindset. I think the polar opposite of that is then that's flighty. Then the people aren't going to. I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm saying let's agree on 2 or 3 things to say, and say what do you want to get out of this?
Yeah.
And here's what I want to get out of it from a company standpoint. So if we can agree and we can stay on that line, and then it's not a mystery, or it shouldn't be a big surprise when somebody says, you know what? I got that job with P&G Communications. One of the guys that worked with me at Centrifuge, that was his dream, that was his goal, and he had worked for, some newspapers and done some writing. And so here was an opportunity with our organization to run our social media, to work with marketing, to do some, and he leveraged that to get a job with Procter & Gamble, and still, I believe, runs their Tide channel on social media.
That's
great. And that's, like you were saying, it's a leadership trait to be able to say that we helped move that person forward. And now what's the next person on the assembly line? It's not like, you're just going to be stuck here forever.
Right. I love that example. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about next a little bit more about what you're doing to drive growth and bring more jobs to Greenville. How are you or your entrepreneurs that you work with, how are their companies attracting talent and developing them?
So the way that I would like to position things from a next standpoint is that we are central to the economic development strategy of the city, the county, and the region. Just like with an investment portfolio where you need to mitigate your risk and have several bets placed out, this innovation and entrepreneurship, fostering innovation and entrepreneurship, there needs to be an answer for that. And it doesn't mean to be everything. It's not going to be the entire portfolio is going to be in the S&P 500 or whatever, but it needs to be. You need to have an answer for that. That sometimes looks like investable startups. That looks like venture capital. Sometimes that looks like just a healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem of creative people that want to have an arts district or breweries, things like that. The importance is to have that mix and to be well-rounded enough so that if you've got an environment where there's a large manufacturer that wants to come into town and they've got 3,000 jobs and going to build a 50,000 square foot warehouse and they're going to have a 10-year lease, that's great. That's important. But when you get a call from somebody that is a Salt Lake City fintech company that is looking for an East Coast outlet and they would like to talk to some Series B startups, that's when we get the phone. We don't speak startup. Eric, can you talk to me? What do we got here? And that's where we have developed that resource map around this hashtag Startup Greenville, which is just a rallying cry. It's just a nickname. It's not an organization. It's a mindset around which we can all kind of rally and understand that this table could represent the startup ecosystem. And we've got, Furman's got its stuff here and Next is here and Endeavor and VentureX and obviously the, DataStream and some of the other more successful companies that have come up through the ecosystem. You're all on the same table, but who's taking care of the table?
Yeah.
Who's making sure that we don't need to put a coaster underneath the bottom that's not level or we're colliding? And that's an important construct to have. It's an important mindset to have that we're all part of this. I think it's also imperative that we understand where we are geographically and where we are demographically, and that it's not necessarily about consistent exponential growth, that we need 4,000 entrepreneurs or we need we're in Greenville, the upstate of South Carolina, and 5 million people live in the entire state. More people live in Atlanta than live in the entire state of South Carolina. But we do need to get to a critical mass point, and we're not there yet. We do need to do what we can as next to what I call bang the trash can, draw people out of the woodwork and say, do you realize you're part of the ecosystem? And here's how you can contribute. Well, I don't have an idea. I'm never going to be that locomotive, that front of the train. But you can support those entrepreneurs. Right. You can be the other humans that are following that locomotive along, or you could be at the front of the track, getting things off of the rails to make it easier for entrepreneurs to be successful. So it's integrated into the economic development strategy. Now, what we're specifically talking about is high growth entrepreneurs, and that's a jargon-laden term. But I want to demystify that too, of telling you what we're talking about when we talk about high growth. And at the center of what looks like a bullseye, these aren't binary answers. It's if you answered no, then it's not that this is off, but it's more of a matrix view. But the center of it is, does this thing scale? Do you want this thing to go beyond the Camber and Eric show? Are we going to scale this? Could we hire another employee? Could you put another SKU on the line? Would you have another service? Would you open up another branch? What that isn't are sole proprietors or real estate or franchise, things like that. That's something that really is tough to scale. So does it scale? The second rung is, does it create wealth? And not just wealth for the owner, right? But wealth for would somebody else put their money in this? Yeah. Could you find an investor? Wealth for the employees. These are knowledge-based jobs that you could help create a future entrepreneur. It's one of the things that I like to say is that, the next entrepreneur is working for the next Marty Osborne is working for Marty Osborne. The next Scott Millwood is working for the next Paige McFeely is working for. That's where that progression is going to come from. Yeah. So are you creating wealth or is this just these, entry-level type of jobs that don't have that type of perspective? The third rung is, what's the founder's ambition? Is this a pyramid scheme? Is this somebody that's just out for themselves? Or is this somebody that we want to get behind? Is this somebody whose success narrative we want to be a part of? The fourth rung is the regional impact. Not too crazy about, Anchorage, Alaska, or, some other region. We're about the city of Greenville, Greenville County, the Greenville MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area, 4 counties. Then the lines get blurry in the upstate, but that's our footprint. Yeah. This is not a nationwide endeavor where we're trying to support entrepreneurs, across the country. And then the final rung, does it create jobs? We can't get away from that. We are central to the economic development strategy. That is a barometer that is been indelibly marked into all economic development initiatives. And some of those formulas are changing because we're realizing that it's tough to and it's expensive to bring a 1,500 person manufacturing facility in, and the incentives are such that you're really not making any money as a state or as an ecosystem on bringing this development in. So how can we grow by not shrinking, hold on to that talent that we've got, push them into these high growth opportunities, and watch them flourish? Yeah. So the final thing is, we've got to measure it. We've got to be held accountable to say, is any of this working? And some of those are tough but frank questions, and they're really quite simple to boil it down. And I look at it in terms of just 3 questions that we can ask. And we should hold ourselves accountable. Everybody that's on the table, are you asking your portfolio this, and are you asking yourself this as an entrepreneur? And that first question is quite simple: are you making money? Revenue, whatever are you making money? If so, how much? What's the range? Where's it coming from? What do we need to know? If no, why not? How can we help? Are you making money? Second question is, are you raising money? If yes, how much? What's the range? Where's it coming from? Is it institutional? Is it individual? Is it foreign investors? What do we need to know? If no, why not? How can we help? Not enough local early stage capital. I don't have my story straight. We're not looking at the right things. So are you making money? Are you raising money? And the third question is, are you hiring? If yes, how much? What's the range? Where are they coming from? What do we need to know? If no, why not? Is it a matter of that we need to talk to the folks at the universities, whether it's Greenville Tech or Furman or Clemson or Ohio State or whatever we want to talk through? How are they contributing to this? Because those universities can be a great welcome mat to the talent to say, stay here, stick around. I don't know what the count is, but Clemson and Furman collectively bring in a lot of people to the upstate on an annual basis. This is going to be their home for the next 4 to 5 years. We'd like it to be their home for the next 30 to 40 years as they find resources and availability to bounce around, to stay in different things and to pursue. But those 3 questions all center around growth.
And I get those questions as an entrepreneur. So you guys are definitely reaching me and I'm answering those questions. But I like that, you have to measure, right? Because how else do you know what to do next? No pun intended.
But that's where we need to say what's broken, right? We can't fix what's not
fix
right.
What you don't know.
How do we know? And I've committed to not be just a happy years guy, to say, look, here's everything's great. Look at these shiny objects. Look what's going on. I also want to be the guy that says, look, I got back from the coal mine and I got 3 dead canaries. Is no one telling you this? Are we ignoring the fact that we have these opportunities here, and let's fix them so that we can address it and do better?
Right. Well, in the remaining time that we have left, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it really gives people a nice picture of the work that you're doing, both in the next ecosystem and beyond. I mean, you're really reaching a lot of different entities. And so in our remaining time, the companies that are listening, watching, I think that the clear answer is figure out how to get involved in this entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, right?
Yeah,
how do they do that? Like, do they come to you? Do they get involved with the mindset of, Startup Greenville? What is it?
One is just a general awareness. And so one of the things that we've created at Next is a series of events. They can be, we divide them up into signature events and community events. So signature events happen a couple times a year. They're bigger things like Next Venture Summit, which is in September, and Next Launchpad, which is in April. The former is geared towards later stage investable startups. And the one in the Launchpad in the spring is geared towards early stage startups. But in between them, we have Founders Forum, which is what I call bus stop events. These things happen with regularity. It's every month. You miss the last one.
Nice little plug for Founders Forum.
You missed the last one, come back, don't worry. Just in 10 minutes, the next bus will come by. So it's being active in the community in that way. Another thing is tying in with the media. They are a critical component to telling our stories and to shining a light on what's happening here. So, Greenville has the Greenville Journal and Upstate Business Journal, and there's a number of different facets and outlets. And then there's the social media channels, the earned media for all of these outlets, these 66 nodes around the Startup Greenville ecosystem. When you see the map at startupgreenville.com, there's a resource map, and there's 66 different nodes. Each one of them has a story. Each one of them has a pathway and something that you can contribute to or be involved in. So what I would ask of these employers is an acknowledgement that their talent isn't going to be with them forever. So how do we make that experience mutually beneficial? And how do they, as a contributor into that ecosystem, make sure that ecosystem is thriving, that we're watering the plants where we need to, we're pruning the leaves that aren't growing, and just an acknowledgement that you play a role in this. It is integrated, this is complementary, these things feed off of each other. And you'll find that that's mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
That, that kind of Google has this attitude of you may not be, you may not work here forever. And if you've got an idea, we want to encourage you to go out there and we'll be your first customer.
Yeah.
You got something that we can benefit from. I think that would be a point I'd like to get across.
Yeah, no, I think that is a really great way to wrap up this conversation. Anything that we didn't touch on today, Eric, that you'd like to share with this audience?
Not that comes to mind.
We did cover a lot, so I feel like you didn't miss anything. But just to wrap some things up, what I heard from you today, there's a lot more than just what I'm about to say, but people need to learn from entrepreneurs, regardless of age. There's a lot to pick up from. Like you said, it's hard. It's always hard being an entrepreneur. So learning from them is key. There needs to be this mutually beneficial approach. If you don't do that, you are going to miss out on good talent in the future, and you're probably going to lose some talent as well, not in the right way. You mentioned a little bit about just pathways and how things are not that clean cut, stay in a company for 30 years anymore. It's important for this audience to understand that is likely not going to happen anymore. Longer gone are those days. And then really just, again, acknowledging this meaningful work, fulfilledness, right? People need to feel fulfilled in order to go do a good job. And again, there's a lot that we could talk about and reiterate the entire conversation, but those were just some key things that I want to highlight at the end. Anything else before we wrap up?
I think that you hit on some good points that, I'm an entrepreneur used to be code word for can't hold a job. Yeah. I'm an entrepreneur, and but that's not necessarily a negative thing. And I think even more so as we become entrepreneurial and we think about through fostering that spirit that's going to be important going forward.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric, so much for joining the show. This was a really fascinating topic, and I'm so happy you were here. Thanks again for joining us on The Great Retention with Camber Parker. Before you go, remember this. Young professionals make up nearly half of the workforce today and are expected to jump at a rapid pace in this next decade. What will you do to help them become the great leaders we need for the future? Join us next time for more information on how to recruit, understand, and retain young professional talent. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic and more. Plus, don't forget to share with your coworkers. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.